Welcome to my channel. I got a question. Someone asked me, how can we set multiple configuration environment for Nest.js application? Let's say you want to set up a different environment variable for dev, dev environment, or you want to set a different development environment setting for production or for testing. How can you do that? Let me show you with the help of diagram. Let's say here is our Nest.js application, and what you want a separate environment variable for development. This should be a separate, let's say this is a dev environment. Let's say I will have a separate env for dev. I can call it env.development. Here I will have a different variables for development related. Let's say I have a different secret key for dev. Similarly, I will have a separate env for production. If you are also doing testing, you will have a separate env for testing. This one is my production key. In most of the application, if you have worked with Stripe SDK, Stripe also provide a different API key for testing, development, and production. On the test API key, you will not actually perform transaction, but you can test your code. Let's say this one should be my test, env.test. This should be, and let's say secret should be a different, right? So I'm gonna show you how can you achieve that in Nest.js based application. First of all, we need to install a couple of packages. The first package, we need to install NestJS config. Another package, we need to install Joy, which is used for validation. This one is just a simple getting started project I have created with Nest.js CLI. I did not add anything yet. You can create a new project and follow along with me. As I told you my approach, we're gonna have a separate env file for development. We also going to have a separate env for production, and we also going to have a separate env for test. We need separate env for production. We will have a different configuration for each environment. Let's define that. The first property, I will have node env. Let's set up the development. Port is 3000. I'm gonna set the database URL. This one is my local database URL. Here I will have the secret key. I can say my secret key dev. And my secret key is dev. Similarly, I can have properties for my production, for my production. This should be production. For production, I'm gonna use 5500. I'm gonna use some host. It should be some url.com, and my DB should be different on production, and this one should be prod. So you can configure same setting for test. For testing, I can use something else. This one should be my test DB. If you have worked in Stripe based application, they provide a different API key for testing, for development, and for production. When you perform any transaction on development API key, it will not actually deduct any balance. So we have created 3 envs. Now, how should I tell Nest.js that I want to load the configuration from development environment. Let's say I'm doing coding in local environment, development environment. How can I tell Nest.js which environment to use? That is why Nest.js config module. We need to use that. Nest, I can say config module. We need to initialize that by calling the for root method. This is global, allow us to use config service in any of the module. I'll show you how to do that. Is global is true. We need to provide the, let's load some configuration. It's an array. It will take a function, right? And it's gonna return an object. This function will return the object. I'm gonna use the node env, port, database URL, and my secret key. That's all I need to do from here. What else I should do? Set the env file path. Env file. Actually, I should do it here. Yeah, I should do it here. Let's use the template string. If our environment is development, then load the configuration from the development file. If our environment is production, please load configuration from production file. This load is just a function I'm telling to config module. I have defined these properties in my env file. You should look for only these properties. You should look for only these properties, right? It is making me confusion. What I can do, I can copy that and create a new function, configuration.ts file. I can export a default function. Now everything is fine now. I'm telling to config module, I have defined these properties in my env file. You should look for these properties, right? What I can do, I can import configuration here. Configuration here. Now it looks simpler. And I have defined my env file path, and we also need validation schema, right? I'm gonna create a new validation schema. I call it validation. If user will not provide any key, we should send the error back. Let's import star as joy from joy. Let's write the schema, validation schema. Default is, I have set the default port, which is 3000. If you did not define any port, it will use 3000. These are my valid environment. By default, I've set the development. Database URL is required and secret is required. Overrides the handling of unknown keys for the scope of current object. You don't need that. Let's export the validation schema. All right. Now I should use that here. Let's import that. Everything is good now. We have, let's say, how can you tell Nest.js I would like to run the application in development mode or production mode? We can create a script for that here. Nest.js.dev. I can modify my script. Dev script node env should be development. That's it. Let's run the application. npm run start dev. Now our application is running. We can also create a script for prod. Production. I have already created the script for prod. They have already created that, but I want to use a different script. This time I would like to mention the production. I don't need watch here on the production. Let's run the application. It is production. In production, we have set the 550 port. Let's run our application on localhost 550. Welcome to my config example, right? Now, one more thing, you can also, let's say I want to use my config service here. You can also inject that config. I can import that or inject that from here. Let's log environment variable. You can use this .config.get method and parse that as a string. Port should be a number. You can parse that into a number. This .config.get method is used to get that. Let's run our application again, because in production we are not using watch. Let's look at that. You should see our environment is production. Our current port is this one. This one is our database URL. Let's say I would like to run the application in dev mode. This time you should see our current environment is development, Postgres. My app should be running on 3000. That's it. This is how you will configure Nest.js application on multiple environment. I would like to show you one more thing. Let's say if I comment this out, let's say I'm not going to provide database URL in the development environment. I have set the required. It should give me the error hey, your database URL is missing. It's a required property.